So, Al Darrell agrees doesn't replicate a real world rollover. Ford does not test for real world rollovers. It's a 0 mile per hour test. No rollover for seatbelts. Darrell says this is a tire blowout test. Remember when I asked him about the tire blowout test? This is what he said. We do it at 50 miles an hour. A spike blows out the tire. The test is done by a test driver within handling characteristics of the Aerostar van, within the handling characteristics. It's done at the worldwide proving grounds, and it is a real-world test. And we know proving ground safety rules. We know that when it's a test at the proving ground safety rules, they've got to use roll bars whenever a roll bar is, whenever a test is subject to rollover. A vehicle is subject to rollover. Roll bars must be installed when in the opinion of supervision, the vehicle is subject to rollover. Tests of this type are A, tire blowout tests. Now, what did Mirta Felipe have in her car the day that Julian got hurt? A tire blowout. Did she have a roll bar? No. Did Julian have a special seatbelt? No. Did Ford have knowledge of the hazard? Yes. Did Ford engineer out the hazard? No. Did Ford guard against the hazard? No. Did Ford warn about the hazard? No. Is Ford liable for negligence? That's for you to decide. Now, Ford says a lot of things. Take us back. This is also from Mr. Darrell. Ford known for many years that you could be belted in a light truck and break your neck. That's more than negligence. Now you actually have actual knowledge. You have the Ford's obligation, engineer it out, guard against it, or warn. They have the knowledge, they got the solution. What do? Nothing. What's their defense? We're wearing a Speedo, the minimum standard, even though it doesn't apply, even though it doesn't make you safe. Heaven knows that passing the minimum standard doesn't mean a car is safe. Doesn't mean a car is safe. Doesn't mean, all it means is they can sell a car. That's all it means. Here's the summary when I went through it with Mr. Darrell. Braking, I asked him, I used the dictionary, as to what a hazard is. And I said, is breaking your neck in a rollover situation in a Ford Aerostar van a hazard? A hazard. And he said, yeah. And then we went through it. What do you do when you find it a hazard? You engineer it out. If you cannot guard against, if you cannot, you guard against it. If you cannot, you warn. And then I asked Mr. Caulfield the same series of questions, and he agreed to all of that as well, if you can recall. And this is my scientific drawing. With Mr. Caulfield, well, listen, if you get the seatbelt to minimize excursion, now with a locking and a cinch plate, you minimize it from 2 to 4, so that's, you double. I'm sorry, backwards. So it's 4 inches excursion, and you cut it down to 2. 2 inches under the locking cinching plate by tightening it up. Real simple. Old technology. You didn't even have to get into pretensioners. Pretensioners were around since the 80s. Mercedes-Benz had them. And that sensor they're talking about, it's what causes the airbag to come out. Boom. That technology was there too. All you had to do is put them together in a rollover situation, and you could use pretensioners, which pulls you back into your seat before the load is applied. Before the load is applied, it locks you into your seat. So they had the technology and availability to do that in the 80s. Mercedes-Benz did it. And Mr. Pearson told us that and proved that. But we don't need that. You can go with a locking or cinching plate, and you'd minimize excursion by 2 inches. But that's not enough. And we know it's not enough, because what would happen then is the roof comes up and gets you once it deforms in 1/20th of a millisecond. bam, boom, breaks the neck. So we need both. So you use a seatbelt that minimizes excursion, number one. Number two, you got to have a roof that's got the ability to withstand deformation. And using the Speedo standard is 5 inches. 5 inches. Now you would expect that a drop of a foot, 11.6 inches, would not result in 11 inches of dynamic intrusion into the roof and 9 inches of static intrusion. Shouldn't be more than 5. I mean, that's that. Even Mr. The defendant's automobile reconstructionist, Malden, he said this was not a big drop. It rolled, not a big drop. Remember when he said not a big drop? Not a big drop. Yeah, look at the damage we got. Mr. Caulfield says he knows he can make that stronger. Ford knows it's important to keep it stronger. Now, in the test track, Mr. Darrell said, despite pushing the cars to the limits, which is what they do a lot of times in test track with new equipment, taking those J-turns at high speeds, over 100-mile-an-hour speeds, and testing equipment to the limits. Nobody's ever been seriously injured or killed. Why? Because they use roll bars, roll cages, 5-point seat belts. There's no reason for anybody to get hurt in a rollover. None. Maybe some very strange circumstance, but no. Not if you use reasonable care. Ford knows how to do it. Ford knows better. Ford knows better. And when it knows better, it's got to do better. See, if something is foreseeable, if you see something can happen, it's preventable. And if it's preventable, it shouldn't happen. If it's foreseeable, if you can see cars are going to roll over, people can hit their necks and they can break their necks, and we've known that since 1968, you can prevent it. You've got a duty to prevent it. And if you don't, then that's negligence. And if you don't do it intentionally because you know about it and you choose not to do it, that's more than negligence. That's intentional. And when it's a design policy that goes all the way up to the heads of design and Ford, that's corporate policy not to do it. And we heard from Mr. Billmeyer that what they do is they pass on the defect. Remember when he said that, Mr. Billmeyer? They pass it on. They know it's there. They don't fix it. They pass it on. What does pass it on mean? It means they sell it. They don't warn about it. They move it along. That's what it is. So they're using the roll bars. We know that remember Mr. Wiley who testified here? Mr. Wiley? He was a test track driver for Ford for 24 years. This is not a guy that was paid millions of dollars by Ford. This is not a person that's on the Ford payroll, or never was, as an expert. He wasn't in what do they call those engineers? Design analysis, which is another word for litigation support. The way like Dr. Martin, Mr. Darrell, there were design analysis that really was litigation support. No axe to grind. He comes in and he said a lot of different things. Can we bring up some of his testimony, please? Let's look at this together because it's important.